Before I discuss how this second wave, the Industrial Revolution, reshaped our workday, I'm going to take a step back and mention a few more of the profound changes that happened during the first wave, or the age of agriculture, because it's the repercussions of the first wave that led to the second. Now, in addition to creating specialists, agriculture also gave people a reason to stay rooted to the land, because, well, if you planted your crops, you'd want to stick around until it was time to harvest them. So instead of wandering in pursuit of game, people who adopted agriculture ended up creating villages, which sometimes also led to the creation of cities. So wherever agriculture arose, what we call civilization also arose, whether it was in Africa or the Americas or Asia or Europe or the Middle East. Now, agriculture didn't arise everywhere because not every place in the world has plants and animals that can be domesticated. Now, in Europe, they had plants like wheat and barley and animals like cows and horses, and those are all easy to domesticate. Australia, on the other hand, doesn't have any native plants and animals that can be domesticated, even if you could succeed in throwing a plow over a kangaroo. Good luck at getting it to do any useful work for you. So the fact that it wasn't possible to domesticate their plants and animals meant it wasn't possible for any of the Australian Aborigines to specialize just in food production. And that in turn limits the specialists in other areas. And this largely explains why the Australian Aborigines remained hunter and gatherers, at least for the most part, up until the 1600s or so. With what we call civilization, at least in terms of agriculture and written laws and technology, none of that came to Australia until it was imported from other countries. Now, there's lots more to say on the subject of what we call civilization, but I'm not going to get into any of that because for the limited purpose of this video series on why we have to work, my only point is that wherever it was possible for people to improve the chances of securing their next meal by domesticating their plants and animals, they would go ahead and do so, and that practical step had lots of side effects that rippled and continue to ripple. Now, the two side effects of agriculture that I've discussed so far are that its increased efficiency had the side effect of creating specialists, and the desire to stick around until your crops came in had the side effect of the creation of villages and eventually cities. Now, the third side effect is that when you have specialists in areas like math and science, and you combine that with specialists who develop the written word, this creates the side effects of humans being able to accumulate knowledge in a way that we were never able to during our previous 40,000 years or so of existence. Now, during our hunting-gathering stage, pockets of human wisdom mostly remained just within isolated tribes. I mean, to some extent, it could be passed on by oral tradition, but the knowledge still tended to stay within a limited region. And also, oral tradition is at its best in creative areas like storytelling. It doesn't work quite as well in areas of precision like math and science. But with the emergence of writing, the collective wisdom and knowledge of the human race had a chance to be preserved and to accumulate. And by the 1600s, knowledge accumulated to the point where people were able to create machines and factories that could replace human strength and animal strength. And these inventions ended up creating such upheavals in human society that this was labeled as a new era, or what we call the Industrial Revolution, or what Alvin Toffler calls the second wave. Now, one of the many changes that came with the Industrial Revolution was that labor became much more divided. Now, back in the agricultural age, a specialist would make one complete product and one at a time. Now, with the Industrial Revolution, the labor that went into creating one product was divided up among lots of different workers. Now, this is where the workday starts to get a lot more complicated and starts to look more like our own. Now, take something like pin making. Now, in the agricultural days, there would be a specialist dedicated to making one pin at a time. And with pin production in the new age of industry, you'd have 10 people or so, or more, all contributing their small part to the task of making that one pin. Now, I'm going to read a quote from a 1776 book called The Wealth of Nations. It's by the economist Adam Smith, and in this book he describes the new pin-making process. And Smith writes, "One man draws out the wire, another straightens it, a third cuts it, a fourth points it, a fifth grinds it at the top for receiving the head," and so on. Now, in today's world, especially in large businesses, we have a similar arrangement. Each employee contributes a small part to that larger task of producing a company's product or service. Now, why did this second wave occur? Why would an agricultural society even want to industrialize? Now, I raise this question because many of the changes that we associate with the Industrial Revolution are negative. There's the pollution, there's the ugly factories, labor that's either mind-numbingly repetitive or outright hazardous to your health, and sometimes both. It also led to rampant greed on the part of the factory owners. In some areas, it's led to destruction of the environment. It's destroyed traditional lifestyles. Why did the human race make this move? All right, to be continued in part 4.